Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be giving you the top 10 armies of January. It's a new year, so I figured it was time we change things up a bit this time around and do things a little differently. So first off, I will now be considering the top 5 armies from all ITC, GT, and Majors that are posted on the Best Coast Pairings app instead of only using the top 3. I feel this is a much needed change because very often there would be armies that were consistently top 5 but didn't really make it into the top 3, but I feel like that should be good enough to get them into the top 10 because consistency is very important for armies in 40k competitive. So I feel like this makes things a bit more accurate and I felt like this change was needed. So the placings on these lists will now be how many times these armies have placed top 5 instead of top 3, with the armies that had more placings higher on the list. So that's the first change. The second change is there will no longer be tiebreakers, and there will now be ties for placements on these lists if that happens to occur. The tiebreaker I used to use in past videos was the army's previous placings on previous top 10 lists, but now I feel this doesn't make sense because these lists are the top lists of the current month. So why should their placings from past months affect their placing for this month? So I felt that this slight change was needed as well. That's it. Very minor changes, but I think this will improve these top 10 lists and make them more accurate and interesting. Let me know down in the comments what you think of these changes and if you like them. If there are enough people who mention that they don't like this new format, then I can go back to the old format. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. So anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into what you guys and gals came here for, and that is the top 10 armies of January 2019. Number 10, Adeptus Mechanicus. The AdMech are back on the top 10 this month with a single first place finish. The list was a 1750 point list and featured a battalion of Soup AdMech, meaning a bunch of different Forge Worlds in the same detachment. It also featured a battalion of the Loyal 32 with 2 company commanders and 3 units of infantry from Astra Militarum, and is pretty much just an easy way to get 5 command points and some cheap bodies, but they also included 3 units of 3 mortars as well. And to finish off the list, there's a super heavy auxiliary detachment with the dreaded Knight Castellan. So for those of you who aren't aware, the ITC and myself determined the primary faction of an army by which sub-faction had the most points spent on it. So in this case, the most points spent in this list is on the AdMech battalion, making this an AdMech army with the Guard and the Knight as the allies. As for the AdMech stuff, we have a couple of Tech Priests, 3 squads of Rangers with 2 Transuranic Arquebuses, a unit of Servitors, a unit of Sicaran Infiltrators, and a unit of 6 Dragoons. So with this list in the ITC format, it's actually pretty good. It gets under most of the secondaries your opponent can pick, which limits their options. And the obvious picks are actually kinda hard to get, like taking Kingslayer on the Castellan. That thing is pretty hard to kill, and I even made a video recently talking about the Castellan, so if you haven't seen that video, then check out that one after this. Making a list that limits secondaries it gives away is great for the ITC, and I highly recommend you try to do the same when building a list for an ITC event. As for my thoughts on this list, I feel like the Dragoons and the Castellan are the heavy hitters, while everything else pretty much just supports them by either being cheap objective holders, like the Loyal 32 or Mortars as backfield objective holders, or providing a bit of extra damage as well to clean up the stuff that the Castellan and the Dragoons didn't kill. Nothing too special in my opinion, but still a decent list, and I'm glad we're seeing a bit of variety in lists post-chapter approved. Number 9, Necrons. That's right, I didn't stutter. Necrons come in at number 9 this month with a 4th place finish and a 5th place finish. To be fair, if this top 10 was in the old format, these guys would have only been an honorable mention. But this is why I feel like the new format will be good going forward. It gives armies a chance to be featured on the top 10 list that can get close to the top 3 but just barely don't make it each time. So yeah, Necrons top 10 of January. Tell your friends. Anyways, the lists were both a bit different from each other, so let's talk about them. The first list I'm going to talk about is another 1750 point list, and is a Sawtech list. It's a battalion that features a Cryptek and Imhotech, 3 units of 8 Immortals, a Triox Stalker, a unit of Scarabs, 3 Doomsday Arcs, and a super heavy auxiliary detachment with a Gauss Pylon. So Imhotech is great because he can use My Will Be Done twice on Sawtech infantry units, so the Immortals in this case. The Stalker provides rerolls for everything while providing a bit of damage himself. The Scarabs can hold objectives or provide area denial against deep strikes. The Doomsday Arcs are decent anti-tank while being pretty durable themselves because of the quantum shielding rule. You could argue that the Doomsday Arcs would be better in the Dynasty that rerolls 1s when they don't move, but I would argue that Sawtech is actually better. Let's say you're playing on a standard ITC board that has a bunch of line of sight blocking terrain. A skilled opponent can limit your targets by hiding them behind the line of sight blocking terrain. This means in order to get damage off on those units, you will need to move your Doomsday Arcs. And if you're the dynasty that rerolls 1s for moving, then you lose that ability because you moved, but on top of that, you now also suffer -1 to hit because you moved with a heavy weapon. If you're Sawtech though, you can move and fire at normal ballistic skill. And if you have to advance to get in range or even just to be able to see the target, well then your weapon becomes an assault weapon and it can still shoot, albeit at a -1 to hit. So it just gives you more options for mobility. And combine this with the Triarch Stalker shooting at the same target, your Doomsday Arcs now get to reroll 1s anyways while shooting at that same target as well. It's a pretty neat combo. And the Gauss Pylon is there for even more anti-tank in this Knight meta that we have been in. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty good Necron list. As for the other list, it's pretty close to this list, except they use smaller squads of Immortals, no Stalker or Pylon, and instead they use a couple squads of Tomb Blades and the new Seraptic Construct Super Heavy. So this second list has a bit more mobility and board presence than the previous list in my opinion, and has better ways of dealing with hordes compared to the first list, while still having enough stuff to deal with stuff like Knights with the Construct and the Doomsday Arcs. Overall, if I had to pick one, I would probably go with the first list, since I feel that list fits my playstyle a bit better, but both lists are still very good. Overall though, I'm happy to see Necrons on the top 10 again. Now if only Grey Knights could find their way onto the top 10 as well. Number 8. Adeptus Custodes. The Custodes are back in the top 10 and sweeping up the competition. They had a 2nd place and a 5th place finish during the month of January. The first list used 3 Armiger Helverins, 2 Shield Captains on bikes, the Vexilla, 2 units of Veritas Praetors, which are the normal jet bikes, and that was it. Pretty standard meta Custodes list for the most part, other than the Helverins, so really there isn't much to talk about. The bikes are very durable with their toughness 6, 4 wounds, 2+ save, and 4+ invul. They also get a ton of shots with the bolters, and they're pretty good in close combat because they can re-roll 1s to hit while hitting on 2s, and then also get to re-roll all their failed wounds on the turn that they charge. Also on turn 1, they chill out with the Vexilla to get -1 to hit on them to make them even more durable. And the Helverins blast stuff from across the field. Pretty straightforward for the most part. And unfortunately, the second player didn't post their list on the Best Coast Pairings app, so I don't have access to it. But I assume it's more jet bikes, since that pretty much seems to be all we've seen out of competitive Custodes lists for a while now. Number 7. Tiernans. So one of these lists messed with my placings pretty hard, because the player listed it as a Genestealer cult army, which had my placings all messed up at first. But when I looked into the list, it had way more points spent on Tyrannid units, so it was technically a Tyrannid list by ITC standards. So public service announcement to everyone who uploads your list on the Best Coast Pairings app for ITC events, please put your faction down correctly, because even if you don't, in the future it will be implemented that you can be carded for posting the wrong faction on your list, since it can be seen as trying to abuse the ITC point scoring system for your faction. This was stated in the new ITC Code of Conduct that I did a review on, including the penalties you can receive by getting a yellow card or a red card. So if you want to check that out, I will have a link for it in the description. So please list your faction correctly in the future, not only to make my life easier when making these lists, but also so that you don't get penalized for something so trivial. So anyways, back on topic. There was a list that placed 2nd and another that placed 3rd for Tyranids during the month of January. The first list I'm going to talk about featured 2 battalions of Kraken and was also 1750 points. Apparently there were a lot of 1750 point tournaments in January, so maybe that is slowly becoming the standard, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. The list featured a Broodlord, the Swarm Lord, 2 big units of Genestealers, a big unit of Termagants, a unit of 3 Tyrant Guard, a Hive Tyrant, 3 units of Ripper Swarms, and a unit of 6 Hive Guard with Impaler Cannons. So pretty much this list is focused on running at your opponent and eating them in close combat, with a couple of range support units to help from afar. The Swarm Lord is playable now with the changes from Chapter Approved, and offers a really good turn 1 Alpha Strike with Kraken Genestealers, because he can give them a double move essentially. The Ripper Swarms are great for holding objectives and even scoring a secondary like Recon pretty easily. And like the AdMech list, this army doesn't really give up too many secondaries in ITC, so it's great in that regard as well, while also being very fast and hard hitting. And the second list is a battalion of Genestealer Cult, a battalion of Kraken Nids, and a patrol of Kraken Nids. The Genestealer detachment is your generic competitive cult detachment. It's an anointed throng formation from the Vigilus book, and it features a Magus, a Primus, an Abominant, 2 units of Neophytes with a couple of Mortars, and 10 Aberrants. In the battalion and patrol of Kraken, it features a Hive Tyrant, a Malanthrope, 2 units of Ripper Swarms, a unit of 19 Genestealers, a Swarm Lord, a unit of 30 Gaunts, and 3 Tyrant Guard. Overall, I'm glad we're seeing Tyranids in the top 10, which I believe is where they definitely belong, and I'm glad we are seeing some variety with them. With the soon-to-be-released Genestealer Cult Codex though, I feel like they are slowly going to become more popular, and Tyranids are mostly just going to be used as allies in the future, but we will have to wait and see. Number 6. Tao Empire. The Tau are back in this month's top 10, coming in at number 6 with a 1st place and 5th place finish. I only have one of the lists to show off and talk about though, so let's go over it. It's a battalion of Tau Sept, a battalion of Vior Viorla Sept, and a vanguard of Sakea Sept. So a soup Tau list, pretty much. The battalion of Tau Sept includes a Cadre Fireblade and Shadow Sun, who in my opinion is an auto-include in Tau Sept lists, 2 10-man strike squads and 1 5-man, 2 Riptide battlesuits, a unit of 12 shield drones, and a unit of 3 broadsides. The battalion of Viorla includes a Cold Start commander, an Ethereal, and 3 big units of crew. And the vanguard of Sakea include a Cadre Fireblade and 3 Firesight marksmen. So the Sakea Sept is pretty much only produce marker lights for the rest of the army. The Viorla Sept provides a screen with the crew while also providing some decent damage since they can advance with their rapid fire weapons which then become assault, so the guns that the crew are equipped with become assault and can still shoot with no penalty because of the Sept trait. And the Tau Sept is pretty much the heavy hitters of the list and provide the most damage when using Monka and Kuyon from Shadow Sun. Overall, this is one of the more unique Tau lists we've seen and it makes me happy. I love variety in competitive lists, and it seems we're getting a lot of that with post-chapter approved. Number 5. Craft Worlds. The Eldar come in at number 5 this month with a 2nd place finish and a 1st place finish. The first list is a battalion of Alatok and a battalion of Inari. But more points were spent on the Alatok, so it's a Craft World list with Inari allies. The Alatok Battalion features a Farseer, a Warlock, 3 units of Dire Avengers, and 4 Wave Serpents. And the Battalion of Inari features a Spirit Seer, Ivrain, 3 units of Storm Guardians, and a unit of Shining Spears, and a unit of Dark Reapers. So this list can put out a decent amount of mortal wounds while also being pretty durable, and also a ton of firepower between the troops and the spears. The Inari part of the list is pretty generic other than the Storm Guardians, but at least the Alatok detachment is actually pretty different from what we normally see at a Craft Worlds. This list has a ton of options of how it can be piloted, which is always good, since I've always said options win games. So overall, I think this is a great list, and I'm glad we're seeing a little bit of variety out of the faction. Number 4. Astra Militarum. That's right, the Imperial Guard are not top 3 this month, and we have some new Kings of Competitive for this month. The Guard received a 2nd and 3rd place finish during the month of January. I only have one of the 2 lists though, so let's talk about that one. So this list features a battalion of Scions using the new formation from Vigilus Defiant, a brigade of Catachan using the artillery formation from Vigilus Defiant, and a supreme command of Custodi Shield Bike Captains. So that's right, this is a Guard list without a Castellan, and only 3 shield captains as allies. This is pretty damn close to being a pure Guard list. I've been saying for a long time that Guard can hold their own for the most part without having to use a lot of allies, and I'm glad that someone is finally proving me right. For the most part. Minus the 3 shield captains. Anyways, the Scion detachment focuses on the bonuses and benefits from the new Scion formation, where they can drop out of the Valkyrie after it moves, and then get a +1 to hit while re-rolling ones with Plasma. And the Catachan Brigade is pretty standard with a couple of new additions. It features a ton of infantry with Strachan, Yarick, which is one of the new additions, a Priest, and of course a couple of Basilisks and Wyverns to make use of the artillery formation and the stratagems, which are really good. I actually talked about these formations or specialist detachments in another video, so if you want a link to that video, I will have it down in the description if you want to learn more about those and why I think they are good. And then of course we have the 3 shield captains on bikes, which are basically Imperium Demon Prince equivalents, or close to that. But they also get a bunch of bolter shots and hit on 2+, and they reroll once. So to say the least, they are pretty damn good. Overall, I'm glad we are seeing more variety in lists now after Vigilus and Chapter approved, and I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but it was starting to get really boring talking about the same lists over and over, or playing against the same lists over and over, so I'm glad things are being spiced up a bit. Now before we get into the top 3 armies of January, here are some honorable mentions. These armies, or in this case, this army, almost made it into the top 10 but lost out due to not having their placings being as good as the AdMech's 1st place finish. So the honorable mention for this month is Sisters of Battle. With the release of their beta codex, some people were saying it was an overall nerf to the army, but personally I actually think they're really good. Sure, some things were nerfed, mainly Acts of Faith, but overall the army is actually still really good. Here's the list really quickly for anyone interested. I'm not going to go over it myself, but I figured some of you might want to see it, so here it is. So with the honorable mentions out of the way, we have one more thing to go over before we get into the top 3 armies of January. This video was sponsored by the Almost Pro Gaming Patreon. First off, Thanks to all my current patrons. I love you all, and without you, the channel wouldn't be where it's at today. So thank you all very much. And for everyone else who isn't currently a patron, if you'd also like to help support the channel and keep it going, then consider pledging on Patreon. I offer a lot of rewards for different tiers and pledges, which include things like list critiquing, an exclusive Discord channel for all of my patrons to discuss Warhammer 40k and get tips and advice, painting advice from the channel's sponsor, 9.5 Miniature Painting, since he is now in the Discord as well, custom list building from myself, personal coaching from myself, and much more. With more support on Patreon, I can be able to afford to travel to more events and compete more often, and also to help me create content like interviews with top players, and also videos based on the events that I attend. The cheapest tier, which is only $5 a month, gets you into the Discord channel and basic coaching and list advice from myself, so it's a great value for the price of a couple cups of coffee, and it goes a long way in helping support me and my channel. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, then consider making a pledge on Patreon. I appreciate all the support I receive, and again, I wouldn't be able to do this without you guys and gals, so thanks in advance. So now, let's talk about the top 3 armies of January. Number 3, Thousand Suns. First off, Magnus did nothing wrong. Second off, the Sons of Magnus make their way into the top 3 this month with a 2nd place finish and 2 4th place finishes. Unfortunately, I only have one of the lists because only one of the players chose to post their list on the Best Ghost Pairings app. This list is 2,000 points and features a battalion and auxiliary support detachment of Thousand Suns and a battalion of Chaos Demons. So the battalion of Thousand Suns has Ahriman and 2 Demon Princes, 2 units of 10 Cultists, a unit of 20 Zangors, and a Hellforged Scorpius. The battalion of Chaos Demons features a Changecaster, a Poxbringer, a Sloppity Bilepiper, a unit of 28 Pink Horrors, and 2 units of 30 Plague Bearers. In the auxiliary detachment is another Thousand Suns Demon Prince. So this list has a couple of options. On turn 1, it can teleport the Zangors across the map for a turn 1 charge, and this is with the use of one of their relics. And they only need an 8-inch charge because of their instrument bonus, and you can re-roll one or both dice. One dice you can re-roll using the spell Gaze of Fate, and the other one you can use a command point on. Personally though, I would just deep strike them the regular way by paying 1 command point to put them up into deep strike, since Thousand Suns do have a stratagem to do that. This way, if you don't get turn 1, you don't have a chance of losing a bunch of Zangors, and you can do the exact same thing that you were going to do anyways, just a turn late for 1 command point. You can also deep strike the Pink Horrors to come in and clear the screen, which will make way for your Zangors on turn 3. Or you can bring them both in at the same time and just clear the whole screen at one go. The Cultists sit on backfield objectives since that's pretty much all they are good for now, and the Plague Bearers lead the Thousand Suns characters into battle while the characters smite stuff and cast other spells along the way. And the Plague Bearers also do a decent amount of damage in close combat when getting buffed from the Poxbringer as well. And the Scorpius is basically a buffed up guard wyvern. It gets 6 D3 shots at strength 6, minus 2 AP, and 2 damage each, and can target units it can't see. So you hide this thing in your deployment and just bombard things all game. Oh, and it hits on a 3+ instead of a 4+ like the guard wyvern would. Overall, I think this is a great list, but I feel like if it came across a list with 3 Caluxus Assassins, it would have some trouble dealing with it. Sure, they could theoretically deal with them, but not fast enough in my opinion. This is why I think bringing 2 or 3 Plague Burst Crawlers in the list is pretty essential. So I assume this list didn't go up against any list that had 3 Caluxus Assassins in them, but I could be wrong. I'm just speculating. Overall though, I'm happy my favorite Legion is in the top 3, and again, Magnus did nothing wrong. Number 2, Orcs. The Greenskins are in the top 3 this month with 2 3rd place finishes and 2 5th place finishes. I've been saying Orcs are going to be great for a while, and these top 10s are really showing it. They usually bring more bodies than you have guns, and if you can't kill a whole squad of boys in one turn, then they just use their version of Tide of Traitors to bring the whole squad back anyways. This can only be done once a game, like Tide of Traitors, but it's still insanely strong nonetheless. Also, with their Daka rule, they are pretty decent as a shooting army as well. Long gone are the days of orcs fearing negative modifiers when shooting. They also have a really good combo with combining 2 Luda squads for a super Luda squad that can then shoot twice a turn, and that also gets protected by a ton of Gretchen and the stratagem Grot Shields. They also have a Big Mech with custom force field that when used in multiples can cover the whole army and give everything a 5+ invulnerable save. The melee parts of the army also get +1 to their move, +1 to advance, and +1 to charge rolls, and they can reroll 1 or both dice when charging using the rule Here We Go. And they can also advance and charge when paired with the aura from a war boss. And they can shoot all of their assault weapons at no penalty while they're advancing. Overall, this army is pretty insane on how many extra things they get and how fast they can close the gap on the opponent's army. On top of that, they take up a good portion of the board with being a horde army, so they can easily win by playing to the mission as well. They can also teleport units across the board with the spell The Jump for either a turn 1 charge or even just to reposition to grab some objectives if needed. There are tons of other things that this army gets as well, but I'm not going to go over all of them. As for the list, you've probably noticed I've been showing them while talking, and I'm not really going to talk about any of these lists in particular since they are all very similar and include the units and strategies I just talked about. Overall, I think orcs are top tier now and are a force to be reckoned with. I have a feeling we'll see at least 1 or 2 orc lists in the top 10 of the upcoming LVO. Number 1, Inari. And that's it for this month's top 10. If you enjoyed the video, fine, I'll talk about the Inari. The Inari come in first this month as the top army with 3 first place finishes and a 4th place finish. The first list is pretty unique, actually really unique. It features an Inari battalion, Witch Cult battalion, and a Harlequin vanguard. The Inari detachment features the Incarn, Eldrad, Mugen Ra, 20 Guardians, 2 units of 8 Rangers, and 8 Shining Spears. The Witch Cult battalion is Cursed Blade and features 2 Succubuses, 2 units of 15 Witches, and a unit of 5 Witches. And the Harlequin Vanguard features a Troop Master, 3 Death Jesters, and a Solitaire. So how this list is piloted and the strategies used, I have no fucking clue. It's super unique and nothing like anything I've ever seen before. I could probably figure this all out if I had time or could play against it and test the list myself, but as of right now, I'm pretty stumped when it comes to this list. So anyways, on to the next list. It features a battalion of Inari, a Supreme Command of Ulthwé, and a battalion of Drukhari Soup. The Inari battalion includes Yvraine, 2 Spirit Seers, 2 units of Rangers, a unit of 8 Storm Guardians, a unit of 9 Wraith Blades, a unit of 9 Shining Spears, and a unit of 10 Dark Reapers. The Supreme Command of Ulthwé includes Eldrad, 2 Warlocks, and a Wave Serpent. And the battalion of Drukhari Soup includes a Homunculus, a Succubus, and 3 units of 5 Cabalites. So for this list, I can easily say that the Cabalites were only brought to gain access to the Agents of X stratagem. And the Succubus and Homunculus are just pretty cheap HQs that can keep the tax on the detachment low. They are also pretty decent HQs as well. The Supreme Command of Ulthwé is just for psychic support, since Eldrad is one of the best psychers in the book, and the Wave Serpent is to lower the amount of drops and to try to get the +1 to go first. And the Inari battalion is pretty standard to what we've seen other than the Wraith Blades. And so the third and final list that I have to talk about features a battalion of Drukhari Blackheart, a battalion of Inari, and a battalion of Alatok Craftworlds. The battalion of Blackheart is pretty much just there to gain access to Agents of Ect, while also providing some mobile units who can provide a bit of anti-infantry and anti-monster with their poison weapons. The battalion of Inari features Yvraine, an Autarch, and 3 units of Dark Reapers, and the Alatok battalion features a Farseer Skyrunner, a Warlock Skyrunner, 2 units of Rangers, a unit of Storm Guardians, and 2 Wave Serpents. So overall, all these lists are pretty unique from one another, other than a few staples. Except for the first list. I still have no clue what's going on with that first list. But it looks like a lot of fun, so I might try it out when I get the chance. I'm actually really happy how these lists aren't just generic copy and paste that we've been seeing from Inari, so kudos to these players for reinventing the wheel. Especially that first list. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content like this. I plan on making a new tier list within the next couple of weeks, and also a review on the new Genestealer Cult Codex when I get my hands on it on release day. So you guys and gals can look out for those within the next couple of weeks. Also, I plan on making a video or 2 about the results from the LVO if that interests you as well. Also, don't forget to check out the channel's sponsor, 9.5 Miniature Painting, for inexpensive but good quality painting commissions. I'll have a link to his Instagram where you can contact him down in the description. And also, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to check me out on Patreon. I appreciate all the support I get, and with more support, I can do even more with the channel and provide better quality content. So if you enjoy the channel enough and want to help support it, then the best way to do that is through Patreon. And if you can't afford to help out monetarily though, I still appreciate the fact that you watch my videos and support me in that way, so thank you very much. Anyways, that's it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys and gals think about the new format I'm using for the top 10s, and let me know what you think about the results from this top 10. I don't respond to every comment anymore because there are so many of them, but I promise I still read every single one. So please let me know your thoughts. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.